We've all heard the advice, eat your protein, hit the gym, and your muscles will grow. While that's partially true, it's far from the full picture. Muscle growth isn't just a function of protein intake or physical training, it's governed by an intricate interplay between your plays and TID. And understanding this neuroscience-based perspective is the key to maximizing your progress, not just in the gym, but in life. Let's begin by dismantling the myth that protein alone drives hypertrophy. Protein is a substrate. It provides amino acids, which are the building blocks. But the question is, what tells the body to use those blocks? That command comes from the nervous system, and it is regulated by timing, intention, effort, and neural signaling. Muscle doesn't grow in the gym. It grows when your brain perceives effort, stress, and adaptation as part of a survival mechanism. In evolutionary terms, your body doesn't grow bigger muscles because it wants you to look good in a t-shirt. It builds muscle because it believes it needs the tissue to survive. Now, let's get scientific. The real drivers of muscle growth begin in the central nervous system, particularly in the motor cortex and spinal cord. Every time you lift a weight, you're not just working the muscle, you're training your nervous system. The motor neurons must fire, the neuromuscular junction must be activated, and a signal must be sent to the muscle fiber telling it to contract. But here's the kicker, that signal is not linear. It's not just about lift, rest, eat. It's about how intense the neural demand was, how long it lasted, and whether your brain interpreted that stimulus as a threat to homeostasis. Muscle growth, in scientific terms, is triggered when muscle fibers undergo mechanical tension, muscle damage, and metabolic stress. But even these factors are secondary to the neural perception of threat. The more the nervous system senses this is hard and I must adapt to survive, the more it signals the endocrine system to release growth-promoting hormones like growth hormone, testosterone. IGF-1 and triggers gene transcription pathways like mTOR lead to hypertrophy. So where does protein fit in? It's the raw material, yes. But imagine having bricks without blueprints. Protein is the brick. But your brain, the nervous system, is the architect. Without the brain saying, we need to build, the bricks sit idle. If your training doesn't create the need, protein alone will not stimulate hypertrophy. Let's go deeper. The real signal for muscle growth begins with intention. When you engage in resistance training and you focus on the muscle, activating it deliberately, you create stronger cortical representations of that muscle. This is not bro science. Functional MRI studies have shown that the motor cortex lights up more intensely when you intend to contract a specific muscle versus passively moving it. That focused activation enhances what's called the neuromuscular recruitment threshold. You fire more motor units deeper within the muscle and signal the body to allocate resources to that tissue. Next, there's neural fatigue versus muscle fatigue. Neural fatigue is often ignored. It refers to the reduction in your nervous system's ability to send strong signals to your muscles after repeated efforts. If your nervous system is under-recovered due to poor sleep, emotional stress, or lack of recovery strategies like non-sleep deep rest, NSDR, you won't be able to push your muscles hard enough to send the build signal. That's why recovery isn't just about rest, it's about brain regeneration. Deep sleep is crucial because that's when growth hormone pulses occur, driven by your hypothalamic pituitary axis. Miss those sleep cycles and no amount of protein will compensate for the absent growth signaling. Then we need to talk about neuroplasticity in the context of muscle growth. Your nervous system adapts just like your muscles. When you progressively overload your training, you're not just challenging the muscle, you're forcing the brain to rewire. You're increasing the efficiency and strength of the neural pathways between your motor cortex and the targeted muscle. That's why beginners often get stronger before they get bigger. The nervous system is becoming more efficient, and only when that efficiency plateaus do hypertrophy mechanisms kick in harder. There's also a critical role for dopamine, a neuromodulator deeply involved in motivation, effort, and reward. When you push through a hard set, especially when your nervous system is telling you to stop, and you override it, you get a surge in dopamine. That dopamine reinforces the neural pathways that say this behavior is worth repeating. But dopamine isn't just about feeling good, it directly enhances motor control and increases the strength of muscle contractions. In other words, your motivation and drive to train hard are not secondary, they are neural drivers of greater physical adaptation. This is why mental focus, purpose, and even visualization matter. If you go into a workout distracted, half-engaged, or disinterested, you're not sending a strong enough signal through the motor pathways. And as a result, the body doesn't treat the experience as a stimulus worth adapting to. But when you go into it with intensity, presence, and a will to conquer, you tap into deeper neural reserves. And here's something most people never consider. Muscle memory isn't stored in the muscle, it's stored in the nervous system. When you return to training after time off and regain strength or size quickly, it's because the neural pathways have already been built. They're reactivating. the nervous system is the librarian of physical experience. So what does this mean for you? It means if you want real, lasting muscle growth, protein is a small part of a much larger neurological and psychological equation. You need to. Most people believe that building muscle is all about consuming enough protein, lifting heavy weights, and getting enough rest. While each of these plays a role, they are only pieces of a much more complex puzzle. At the center of that puzzle is the nervous system, a sophisticated command center that determines whether your body should grow, adapt, or remain exactly as it is. Protein is a substrate, a raw material. But it is the nervous system that issues the order to construct. Without that command, no matter how much protein is available, the growth machinery of the body stays idle. Every physical movement, from the smallest twitch to a heavy squat, begins with an electrical signal in the brain. The motor cortex sends a message down the spinal cord to these stimuli with indifference. Instead, it initiates a chain of hormonal and cellular events that determine whether to maintain, build, or even reduce muscle tissue. If the stimulus is insufficient or too familiar, the nervous system interprets it as non-threatening, and no growth adaptation occurs. But when the stimulus is novel, intense, and sustained long enough to disrupt homeostasis, the nervous system reacts by prioritizing growth. It tells the body, we must become stronger, we must add mass, we must adapt. And this adaptation isn't just local to the muscle. It's systemic. The hypothalamus and pituitary gland, both deep in the brain, are activated in response to perceived physical stress. They, in turn, release hormones such as growth hormone and stimulate the production of testosterone and insulin like growth factor 1, IGF-1, all of which contribute to muscle protein synthesis. But again, these hormones are not released simply because. To these stimuli with indifference. Instead, it initiates a chain of hormonal and cellular events that determine whether to maintain, build, or even reduce muscle tissue. If the stimulus is insufficient or too familiar, the nervous system interprets it as non-threatening, and no growth adaptation occurs. But when the stimulus is novel, intense, and sustained long enough to disrupt homeostasis, the nervous system reacts by prioritizing growth. It tells the body, we must become stronger, we must add mass, we must adapt. And this adaptation isn't just local to the muscle. It's systemic. The hypothalamus and pituitary gland, both deep in the brain, are activated in response to perceived physical stress. They, in turn, release hormones such as growth hormone and stimulate the production of testosterone and insulin like growth factor 1, IGF-1, all of which contribute to muscle protein synthesis. But again, these hormones are not released simply because you consumed protein. They are released because the nervous system perceived a threat, a challenge, a demand to adapt. Without that initial neural signal, the cascade never begins. Consider what happens when someone lifts with maximal effort. The brain must recruit a higher percentage of motor units to generate enough force. This means activating more neurons, faster firing rates, and deeper recruitment of muscle fibers, particularly the high-threshold motor units responsible for strength and hypertrophy. These high-threshold units are not activated during light or casual movement. They require intention, focus, and intensity. The more the nervous system is taxed, the stronger the signal it sends to the body to grow. Now think about the beginner who gains strength rapidly in the first few weeks of training, even before their muscles visibly grow. This isn't magic, it's neurology. The nervous system becomes more efficient at recruiting motor units. It refines the connections between brain and muscle, enhances the timing and synchronization of muscle contractions, and reduces inhibitory signals that normally hold back effort to protect the body from injury. This neural adaptation precedes and enables muscular adaptation. In fact, without it, muscle growth would be limited. Even the so-called mind-muscle connection that bodybuilders emphasize is rooted in neuroscience. When you deliberately focus on the muscle you're working, you activate more neurons within the motor cortex that represent that specific muscle. You increase the amplitude of the signal being sent to the muscle fibers, ensuring greater recruitment and tension. This isn't imaginary. Functional MRI scans have shown that attentional focus directly increases motor cortex activity and muscle activation. Your thoughts literally shape your muscle engagement. But the nervous system's role doesn't stop at the gym. Recovery is also governed by the brain. When you sleep, especially during deep, slow-wave sleep, your brain enters a state of restoration. This is when growth hormone is most potently released. Not coincidentally, this is also when the nervous system is offloading the stress of training and rebalancing itself. If your nervous system is not given time and space to recover, it remains in a state of fatigue. Neural fatigue doesn't always feel like soreness or tiredness. Sometimes it simply shows up as a lack of focus, poor coordination, or an inability to push as hard as usual. When this occurs, motor unit recruitment suffers, the intensity of your training decreases, and the signal for growth diminishes. Even stress plays a powerful role. Chronic psychological stress activates the sympathetic nervous system and elevates cortisol levels. High cortisol not only interferes with testosterone and growth hormone production, but also makes the nervous system less responsive to training stimuli. In essence, when you are chronically stressed, your nervous system is focused on survival, not growth. It sees any additional physical challenge as a threat to be avoided, not adapted to. That's why managing stress, getting quality sleep, and allowing the nervous system to reset is as important as training itself. Another key player is dopamine, a neuromodulator associated with motivation, effort, and reward. Every time you push through a hard set, delay gratification, or achieve a goal, dopamine levels spike. This doesn't just make you feel good, it increases the output of your motor system. It enhances the strength of muscle contractions and makes it more likely that you'll engage in that behavior again. Dopamine is what drives you to train harder, to stay consistent, to embrace discomfort. Without it, even the best training program fails. The nervous system uses dopamine as a kind of internal compass, pointing you toward what's worth pursuing and reinforcing the pathways that lead to progress. It's also important to recognize the role of neural drive in training volume and intensity. If your nervous system is under-recovered or poorly activated, your ability to exert maximum effort is compromised. You won't be able to lift as much, push as hard, or maintain intensity throughout a session. This diminishes the mechanical tension and metabolic stress necessary for hypertrophy. On the other hand, when your nervous system is sharp, responsive, and focused, you can generate higher levels of force, sustain longer sets, and engage more muscle fibers, all of which amplify the growth signal. So if the nervous system is truly the conductor of the muscle-building orchestra, what does that mean for how we approach training? It means that intention, focus, and neural engagement must precede effort. It means that recovery is not about rest for the muscles alone, but restoration for the brain. It means that dopamine is not a luxury, it's a necessity. And most of all, it means that protein is only your brain. Your brain tells the body it's time to build. We are not just flesh and bone, we are wiring and electricity. Muscle is the byproduct of neural demand, not dietary abundance. And until we respect the nervous system's role in this equation, we will always fall short of our potential. The growth you're chasing is not just in your arms, legs, or chest, it starts in your brain. The nervous system drives adaptation. The nervous system controls access to your power. And until it gives the order, nothing changes. Muscle growth is not just a physical phenomenon, it's a neurological event. At its core, hypertrophy, an increase in muscle size, is the result of a chain reaction that begins in the mind. What you think, how you focus, and the intensity of your neural output determine the extent to which your muscles respond to training. The nervous system, particularly the brain and its ability to generate intention and direct attention, has the power to amplify or blunt the signals that drive muscle growth. It is not the movement alone that changes the body, it is the quality and depth of the neural signal that precedes it. Every repetition you perform in the gym starts with a thought. That thought sends a wave of electrical activity through the brain, down the spinal cord, and into motor neurons that interface directly with muscle fibers. These motor neurons act as translators, converting your conscious intent into physical contraction. But not all motor signals are created equal. A half-hearted curl with distracted effort will not produce the same neural output as a focused, intense contraction performed with full attention. This is the difference between movement and activation, between going through the motions and sending a powerful growth signal to the muscle. The central nervous system recruits muscle fibers through a principle called the size principle, which states that smaller, low-threshold motor units are recruited first, and larger, high-threshold motor units are only engaged as force demands increase. These high-threshold units are primarily composed of fast-twitch muscle fibers, the ones most responsible for size and strength gains. But accessing them requires a significant level of neural drive. This is where mental focus and intention come in. When you concentrate deeply on the movement, envision the muscle contracting, and engage fully with the task at hand, you activate a greater percentage of motor units. You literally bring more muscle into the fight. That heightened focus does something remarkable. It recruits not just more muscle fibers, but the right ones. The brain becomes more efficient at directing force where it is needed. The neuromuscular connection becomes sharper, more refined, and more responsive. Over time, this mental engagement trains your nervous system to recruit high-threshold units faster and more consistently, even under fatigue. The body adapts to the mental demand. It prepares itself to meet the next challenge with more force, more coordination, and more potential for growth. Focus also affects the duration and quality of time under tension. When your mind is engaged, you are far less likely to rush through a set or let momentum carry you. You control the eccentric and concentric phases of the movement with precision. This control increases muscle damage in a productive way, which then triggers repair and growth. The nervous system, sensing that the demand on the muscle exceeded its current capacity, signals the body to initiate the hypertrophic process. But if the nervous system doesn't perceive that stress because you were distracted, rushed, or disconnected, the adaptation will be minimal. There's another layer to this, and it involves the neurotransmitter dopamine. Dopamine is the chemical that drives motivation, effort, and learning. When you engage in a difficult task and succeed, or even when you approach it with full effort, dopamine levels increase. This not only reinforces the behavior, making it more likely you'll repeat it, but it also enhances motor output. Dopamine doesn't just make you feel good, it makes your brain more effective at sending powerful, efficient motor signals. It primes the motor cortex, improves signal-to-noise ratio in neural pathways, and increases the energy output of the cells involved in movement. When dopamine is present, your brain can push harder, sustain effort longer, and generate more precise contractions. What's even more fascinating is that dopamine is responsive to perception. If you believe you are doing something meaningful, challenging, and worthwhile, dopamine rises. But if your brain interprets the activity as boring, useless, or obligatory, dopamine stays low. This means your mindset going into a workout directly affects your brain chemistry and, by extension, your physical performance and muscular response. And mental engagement doesn't just change how a set feels, it changes how your brain processes that set and how your muscles adapt to it. This is why visualization techniques, affirmations, and training with purpose are more than just motivational tools. They are ways of altering neural output. When you visualize a perfect rep before performing it, you are rehearsing the motor pattern in the brain. The motor cortex activates even when no physical movement occurs. This primes the nervous system, making the actual movement more efficient and powerful. When you speak words of determination or set a specific intention for your training session, you direct the brain's attention and increase the likelihood that it will produce a high-quality output. These techniques don't just make you feel focused, they create focus at the neural level. It's also important to consider the role of fatigue, not just muscular but neural. The nervous system, like the muscles, becomes tired with sustained effort. When neural fatigue sets in, motor unit recruitment suffers, reaction times slow, and coordination falters. But what's interesting is that the onset of neural fatigue can be delayed through mental conditioning. Athletes who train themselves to focus under stress through breathwork, meditation, or mental resilience exercises can maintain high neural output for longer periods. They can push through where others fade, not because their muscles are stronger, but because their nervous system is more resilient. In this way, hypertrophy is as much about neurological endurance as it is about physical resistance. The nervous system must be able to maintain intense output across multiple sets, multiple sessions, and even across training cycles. This is where discipline and consistency play a huge role. Each time you show up with focus, each time you train with intention, you are training your nervous system to operate at a higher level. Over time, your baseline level of neural intensity increases. You become someone who doesn't just lift weights, you command adaptation through deliberate action. The brain is plastic, meaning it can change in response to repeated effort. The more you train with focus, the more the areas of the brain responsible for motor output and muscle control become active and efficient. This is true even at the microscopic level. Synaptic connections become stronger. Neurons that fire together more often become linked. Motor patterns become ingrained, which means you can generate more force with less effort, allowing you to lift heavier loads or perform more reps without increasing mental strain. This neural efficiency contributes to more volume, more tension, and ultimately more growth. At the same time, awareness of your body, what scientists call proprioception, improves. You develop a sharper sense of where your body is in space, how it's moving, and how to correct its position during movement. This heightened sense is the result of increased neural activity in the sensory and motor cortices. It leads to better form, greater muscle engagement, and fewer injuries. Again, this is not something that happens from passive movement. It happens when you train your mind to stay in the moment, to be present with every rep, and to use every session as an opportunity to deepen the neural connection to your body. One of the most overlooked aspects of training is emotional state. Emotions affect the nervous system profoundly. Anger, determination, fear, confidence, all of these emotional states create different patterns of neural activation. Harnessing the right emotional energy during training can increase intensity and drive. The key is to use emotion as a tool, not a distraction. When emotion is channeled into focus and effort, it fuels growth. When it becomes chaos, it disrupts the nervous system and degrades performance. But you have to think of the nervous system as a power generator. The more you train it to produce focused, intense, deliberate energy, the more capable it becomes of driving adaptation. The nervous system is not a secondary player in muscle growth, it is the control center. The muscles respond to its commands. They wait for instructions. They don't grow because you ate protein or did a bench press. They grow because the nervous system demanded it. So the next time you step into the gym, don't just think about sets and reps. Think about intention. Think about how focused you are, how present your mind is, and how intense your neural output can be. Treat every movement as a conversation between your brain and your body. Refine the language of that conversation. Train the nervous system to send louder, clearer, and more powerful signals. Because in the end, muscle growth isn't just about what you lift, it's about how your brain lifts it. Recovery is often misunderstood as mere rest, a passive process where you simply do less. But true recovery, especially in the context of muscle growth and high performance, is a neural regeneration process that requires active participation and biological precision. Sleep, often taken for granted, is not just a break from consciousness, it is a sophisticated, highly organized neurological state where the brain recalibrates, repairs, and reprograms the systems responsible for adaptation and growth. What you do between training sessions is as critical as the training itself, because it is in that space that the nervous system resets, refuels, and prepares to deliver the high neural output necessary for muscle hypertrophy. When you engage in intense training, you're not just stressing muscles, you are taxing the entire central nervous system. This includes the brain, the spinal cord, and the peripheral nerves that control motor units. The nervous system interprets training as a form of challenge or threat. It responds by activating sympathetic pathways, increasing adrenaline, and deploying neurotransmitters like dopamine and norepinephrine to sustain focus and force. While this is necessary during the workout, this stress needs to be counterbalanced. If it's not, neural fatigue accumulates, your ability to recruit high-threshold motor units declines, your coordination drops, your perception of effort rises, and most importantly, your ability to send powerful growth signals to your muscles diminishes. This is why recovery is fundamentally about resetting the nervous system. Sleep is the most powerful recovery tool because it is the only time the brain enters a state of complete neural reorganization. During deep non-REM sleep, especially stages 3 and 4, the brain shifts out of active waking frequencies and into slow delta waves. These brain waves are associated with physical recovery, hormone release, and neural repair. Growth hormone, the hormone most directly tied to tissue repair and muscle growth, is released in large amounts during this stage. But growth hormone doesn't just stimulate muscle tissue, it also aids in neurogenesis, the formation of new neurons and synaptic connections. This is how your brain learns from training and reinforces new motor patterns. During REM sleep, the brain becomes highly active, but in a different way. It processes emotions, integrates memory, and strengthens neural circuits that were challenged during the day. If you learned a new movement, practiced a difficult lift, or trained a weak body part, the encoding of those skills happens during REM. The nervous system is reviewing, refining, and reinforcing the blueprint for future output. If you shortchange this process by sleeping poorly or not long enough, you don't just feel tired the next day. You disrupt the very mechanism by which your nervous system adapts. Your recovery becomes incomplete. Your progress stalls. You start to feel less connected to your body. You lose that sharpness, that neural edge that separates optimal performance from mediocrity. Beyond sleep, the way you recover during waking hours also influences neural regeneration. Activities that activate the parasympathetic nervous system, the branch responsible for rest and digest, are essential. This includes breathwork, meditation, low-intensity movement, cold exposure, and even practices like prayer or mindfulness. These activities calm the brain, reduce cortisol, and increase heart rate variability, a key marker of nervous system resilience. A high HRV means your nervous system is agile and adaptable. It can mount a strong effort when needed and return to baseline efficiently. A low HRV signals chronic stress, poor recovery, and compromised performance. It's important to understand that the nervous system operates like a battery. Every effort drains it. High neural output during training, especially heavy lifting or explosive movement, requires recharging. Without proper recharging through high-quality sleep and active recovery, the nervous system cannot generate the same level of force or coordination. The signal from brain to muscle becomes weaker. The quality of contraction drops. The ability to push into that high-threshold recruitment zone disappears. And since muscle growth is triggered by high-threshold recruitment, your gains plateau or regress. One of the most overlooked contributors to neural recovery is nutrition. It's not just about fueling muscles, it's about feeding the brain. The brain consumes massive amounts of energy, about 20% of total caloric expenditure, despite being only about 2% of body weight. It requires a steady supply of glucose for energy, amino acids for neurotransmitter synthesis, and essential fats for membrane stability and signal transmission. If your diet is poor, your neural performance will suffer. If your micronutrients are depleted especially. Magnesium, B vitamins, zinc, and omega-3s, your neurotransmitter systems can't function optimally. You'll feel foggy, sluggish, emotionally flat, and physically disconnected. This is not just psychological, it's biochemical. And it directly affects your ability to generate and sustain neural drive during training. Recovery also involves a reset of your emotional and psychological state. Training takes not just physical effort, but emotional commitment. The neural circuits that process motivation, willpower, and goal-directed behavior get taxed heavily. If you are constantly stressed, anxious, or mentally scattered outside of training, your nervous system remains in a hypervigilant state. This impairs sleep, disrupts hormonal balance, and interferes with recovery. Chronic stress keeps cortisol levels elevated, which interferes with testosterone, blunts growth hormone release, and suppresses protein synthesis. But it does more than that. Cortisol also disrupts the hippocampus, a brain region involved in memory and learning. That means your brain becomes less effective at retaining new motor skills or improving existing ones. You're not just losing muscle, you're losing neural capacity. The brain is plastic. It changes based on input. When you prioritize high-quality sleep, deep recovery, and neural restoration, you are training your brain to become more efficient, more focused, and more capable. You build the kind of nervous system that doesn't just survive training, it thrives in it. You become someone who can push hard, recover deeply, and return stronger every time. This is what separates high performers from the rest. It's not just work ethic, it's recovery ethic. It's the commitment to the invisible work, the hours spent off the platform, off the track, off the field, where real adaptation happens. Another key aspect of neural recovery is circadian rhythm alignment. Your brain is synchronized to the 24-hour light-dark cycle. When you train, eat, sleep, and expose yourself to light in alignment with that rhythm, you support the production of hormones and neurotransmitters that govern recovery. Early morning sunlight increases cortisol and dopamine in a beneficial way, helping you feel alert and motivated. Evening darkness triggers melatonin, which promotes deep sleep and recovery, disrupting the cycle by staying up late, using screens at night, or sleeping irregularly confuses the brain. The timing of recovery hormones is thrown off. Sleep becomes shallow. Recovery is compromised. Muscle recovery without neural recovery is incomplete. You can't separate the two. You can't think of the body as a system of parts and pieces. It is an integrated organism with the brain at the center. When your nervous system is fresh, alert, and recharged, your muscles respond better to training. Your coordination sharpens, your force output increases, your perception of fatigue decreases. You move more efficiently with less wasted effort. You learn faster. You get more out of every rep, every set, every workout. So the goal is not to just train hard. The goal is to train smart and recover fully. To treat sleep as sacred. To guard your mental energy as carefully as your physical energy. To use. Every night is an opportunity to regenerate your nervous system, recalibrate your stress levels, and reset your capacity for intensity. To recognize that hypertrophy is not built during the lift, it is built between the lifts, in the stillness, in the silence, in the deep architecture of the sleeping brain. The science is clear. Neural regeneration is not optional. It is the foundation. Without it, no amount of protein, supplements, or volume will yield results. Without it, your system becomes sluggish, your drive fades, your results vanish. But with it, when you sleep deeply, recover intentionally, and restore the nervous system daily, you unlock a level of performance and growth that most never reach. Not because they don't train hard enough, but because they never let the system that drives all training fully recover. Recovery is not weakness, it is not laziness. It is not stepping back, it is the most advanced form of preparation. It is where your next breakthrough begins.